First and foremost, I would like to thank President Russell Lowery-Hart for granting me this opportunity to speak with you today. But before I do so, allow me to introduce myself. I am Dr. Bryan Keith Hotchkins, son of Edie and James Hotchkins, father, husband, brother, friend, and professor. The arc of my scholarship at Texas Tech University is about how organizational climate, context, and culture shape the racial identity development of persons therein. As an adoptee, I utilized the community village, a program my wife, Nedra, and I created in 2013 to teach white transracial adoptive parents of Black children how to use their white privilege to protect their families from white supremacy. And most recently, I've applied the body of my research to educate people about how to transition from being not racist to anti-racist and beyond in our How to Reverse Racism training for transformative organizational change. You may ask, what is the difference between not racist and anti-racist? In his 2016 book, How to Be Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi states that the foundation of racism hinges on the notion that one either endorses the idea of a racial hierarchy as a racist or racial equality as an anti-racist. Living to daily unpack that continuum of racist to not racist to anti-racist is indeed draining. So admittedly, my Black is tired. To illustrate, I've spent 107 days since the tragic murder of George Floyd mourning, trying to determine why people of African descent have never experienced a moment in time where state-sanctioned gratuitous violence in America was not the standard. While searching for the answer to that question, I've also been engaged in emotionally charged conversations with Black, Indigenous, white, and people of color about a variety of topics like how do we engage in work that lessens the generational harm of people of African descent? Why do white people become so incensed when they hear us say Black Lives Matter? And my favorite, what do I need to do in order to make a difference? As I thought about how to arrive at these best answers, I came across an op-ed piece in the Alice Echo News Journal on June 3rd, 2020, entitled, "Time is Now for America to Look in a Mirror and Declare War on Racism," by Russell Lowery-Hart, president of Amarillo College. This piece was passionate and reminded me of the real fears white parents have for their Black children who know they must face racism in perpetuity. The final and most relevant sentence of his piece read, "My son, our collective sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, neighbors, co-workers, students, and friends of color deserve to live in the full glory of our country without fearing it." Upon reading it, I immediately emailed and requested a conversation which confirmed what I already knew to be true. There are leaders in higher education throughout the country, specifically white men, who are genuinely concerned with the healing, helping, and necessary hard work that needs to be done in order to protect the children of everyone, specifically those who journey to college campuses to earn a degree, which brings me back to today and the power of enough. As a young Hotchkins man, my pops taught me about the concept of enough when stating, "Son, throughout life, you'll need to know how much is enough for you to know you're satisfied. How much is enough for you to walk away from someone or something that is traumatic? And do you give enough love to those who love you in a way that they know your love is enough?" For the purpose of this talk, I offer the power of enough, which has three perspectives that directly apply to Amarillo College. The first is enough. To what extent are you invested in students enough holistically that they thrive, not survive, at your institution? I remember arriving at Texas Tech University in the fall of 2016, having relocated from the University of Utah where less than 300 students of African descent were in attendance. On this particular day, I stood in the yard amazed at how many students looked like me, dressed like me, and loudly debated hip hop topics that I do. There are more than 2,000 Black Red Raiders. Boy, that moment made me feel as if I belonged, as if I was supposed to be there. It confirmed my purpose. I also recall Friday, January 27th, 2017, when the federal Muslim ban against 7 countries was signed. I spent the next 2 weeks with numerous African immigrant collegians who came to my office to discuss how it would adversely impact their grandparents, parents, and disrupt their families. Although there was nothing I could do, I listened. I understood that students came to me to discuss their pain. They viewed me as a common cultural reference point, the big homie, as a safe place, personified, where they could be Black, express their concerns, and not be judged. On Wednesday, April 5th, 2017, I published research about how Black women collegians use leadership roles to avoid racist interactions with white men and to debunk Black stereotypes with their white women peers. This research is significant because women who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color are on your campus and are likely experiencing gendered racism that truncates their ability to achieve academic outcomes and to positively contribute to the Amarillo College student body. In this study, the key to their success and ability to navigate hostilities was having a person with whom they could unpack their trepidations about race. Are you that person? Do students trust you enough? Secondly, enough. To what extent are you doing enough to make certain your institution is safe for Black, Indigenous, and people of color? I don't know if you're familiar, but I host the Facade podcast, which is about my love for hip hop, completely non-academic comedy, because I know that my nerd don't always translate well. But I only mentioned it because on Friday, February 21st, 2020, I presented a session at the 43rd Annual Big 12 Conference on Black Student Government entitled Facade Podcast. Can we use hip hop therapy to make sure we gonna be all right in our Blackish? During this session, we unpacked the lyrics to Kendrick Lamar's 2017 Damn album to describe how Black undergraduate collegians endure racism while attending their predominantly white institutions nationwide. It was truly an enriching experience. We learned from each other, we laughed, we cried. We left with a Facade podcast playlist to listen to in effort to remind us that whenever we feel culturally isolated back at our universities, that we are not alone. Also, in 2017, I published research that examined how Black student leaders apply transgenerational knowledge to pursue social change while preserving and protecting the communal interests of Black students. Essentially, how did Big Mama and Pop Pop disrupt racism back in the day, right? And how students can use it to make their degree pursuits easier in the now. How do you know that Amarillo College is safe for Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Conducting faculty book clubs, having diversity food, cultural exchange days, even hosting public forums does not a safe campus make. It is difficult to know how to make a college safe if you're unable to admit being complicit and contributing to the environment being unsafe. What are you willing to do? When will your efforts be enough? Third and finally is enough. To what extent are you interrogating your actions, perspectives, and ability to disrupt enough? Racism is present in every historically white institution. Earlier this year, my alma mater, the University of Oklahoma, dealt with racism on 2 fronts, within the student body and the professoriate. In the former, white sorority members recorded a blackface video mocking the culture of people of African descent, and 2 white professors blatantly used the N-word while conducting lessons in class. Reactive emergency meetings were called. Black, Indigenous, people of color, and white students protested to no avail, and press conferences were held. The classroom is where students come to learn their majors and shouldn't be assaulted by racial epithets, visual or verbal, in the name of First Amendment rights. These types of racist experiences truncate academic productivity and have psychological, physiological, and behavioral consequences that contribute to holistic failure. To this point, last month, I published research about how structural racism within the classroom excludes students of color from learning based on how well they speak standardized and cultural non-standardized English. Essentially, these students have to endure ethnocentrism and xenophobia in order to learn. As an administrator, professor, or staff member, you not only represent Amarillo College, but you are the gatekeepers of knowledge, resources, and opportunity. To what extent do Black, Indigenous, people of color, and white students know you are not racist? To what extent do they know that you are anti-racist? And more importantly, how do they know the difference? What do the policies, practices, and programs at Amarillo College say about the people who work there, what they believe in, and more importantly, what they stand up against? What does the difference look like across curriculum for each major, during student adjudication, court proceedings, and when students post racist material on their social media, or even when the accidental actions of employees communicate the message that we do not want you here? Now, I grew up in a home where my parents smoked, so my body has a visceral response to the scent of cigarettes. So when I enter any room where smoking occurred, I get nauseous. Essentially, those spaces are toxic to my being. To extend this example, there are spaces, places, and people on every predominantly white campus where Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience a visceral response when entering rooms where their cultural intuition warns them that they are unwelcome. They see it in the looks, feel it when they're being ignored, and sense it in the tone of people who reluctantly speak to them. Earlier, I mentioned that I was asked by a range of people, what can I do to make a difference? Here are 3 immediate recommendations. 1, read so that you know the range of the rage. What was the last book about race that you simply could not put down because it spoke to the heart of your soul deeply? I suggest Between the World and Me, So You Want to Talk About Race, or How to Be an Anti-Racist as required readings. You want to come to any discussion about racial advancement informed and ready to combat the outrage. 2, disrupt racism whenever it is present. Hold everyone and anything accountable, beginning with yourself. Is there a department on campus where Black, Indigenous, and people of color don't work? Do people know who the allies are on campus because they've been vetted and repeatedly are associated with assaulting racist action? Just because the minority student enrollment is near 40% doesn't mean that racial microaggressions and racial battle fatigue are not occurring at Amarillo College. 3, be willing to sacrifice everything. This includes your resources, career, friendships, colleague circles, and even prestige to stand up for what is righteous and just. Don't be afraid to lose something in order to gain something for those who have historically been marginalized. Calling out racism is the role of an anti-racist person because they understand that to be silent is to be complicit in the oppression of others. When was the last time you witnessed a racist act? What did it make you think? How did it make you feel? If you did nothing, why? In this new era of civil unrest where taxpaying Americans like Breonna Taylor have yet to receive justice, there are students, faculty, administrators, and staff members at Amarillo College who are ready to engage in protest, who are craving new knowledge about being allies, and who see the need to transform this institution into an anti-racist place where knowledge is accepted, people are empowered and supported. I challenge each of you who hear this message to be the reason why transformative institutional change occurs at Amarillo College, and to be the person who has made the transition from not racist to anti-racist. Because although we can never do enough, we can most certainly dedicate our lives to doing so. Thank you for your time.